Can everybody hear me okay? Excellent. Okay. Like was said, my name is Vincent Danen. I'm the Vice President of Red Hat Product Security. I've been in the open source security industry arena, whatever, for almost 25 years. 16 years at Red Hat and 8 years at Mandriva. Prior to that, I was basically their entire security team over there. So I've been doing this for a really long time. Throughout all of that, I'm going to make this claim. I'm not a professional developer of any kind, but I have written a lot of code over the last 25 years in a number of different languages. And my day job is not writing code, as much as I'd sometimes like it to be. And it hasn't been for some time. But last year, I found myself in the position of needing to write some code, which is what I want to talk to you all about today. So a few years ago, a member of my team brought up the idea of VEX replacing Oval. And I didn't exactly laugh at them at the time, but I certainly disagreed with it as any kind of a priority. Thankfully, they ignored me and pushed forward anyways. Now, we've started adopting the creation of these VEX documents, and we have been producing Oval documents since about 2006. We've been doing this for a really long time. We still publish Oval documents today for current releases, but in the future, we're going to be producing VEX only. And we started publishing VEX documents for consumers and customers to test in 2023. And we've been producing them as a primary security document since 2024. But before we get into it, what's the real problem that VEX is trying to solve? I would posit it's better, more accurate information on whether or not a system is actually vulnerable to a particular vulnerability. So you'd think this wasn't really a problem that needed to be solved, right? Well, we have dozens of vulnerability scanners and they all work basically the same way. And they all produce false positives. But more importantly, they also produce false negatives. Now, VEX can help provide very accurate information here that scanning vendors could and probably should use. After all, they used Oval and still use it despite Oval's limitations. And I think that everyone here wants to see more accuracy. Now, what you see on the screen right now is not accuracy. This is a fully up-to-date RHEL 9.5 virtual machine with no Red Hat rated critical or important vulnerabilities. And yet you can see that this particular scanner claims that there are over 600 important findings. So after we started producing these VEX documents, I asked the team what I thought was, to me, a fairly simple question. How does an end user use them, and what tools are we providing for them to do so? Well, to date, we still ship OpenSCAP, which reads those Oval documents, so I assumed that we would have some sort of tool that allowed our customers and users to be able to use these shiny new documents that we're producing. And I was given the most unsatisfactory answer. You can probably find something from Oasis. So we use the CSAF VEX format, and so that would make sense, but we didn't have any tooling that read our own VEX documents. Okay, and that actually didn't feel right to me because it meant that we were producing something, not using it ourselves, and not letting our customers know how to use it. So it kind of felt to me like SBOMs. We would produce them and then leave it up to customers on how to figure out how to use them without giving them any direction whatsoever. I don't like that, so I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do something about that, especially when I started digging into what these VEX documents were and what I thought that their potential could be. So first, I'm going to take a quick step back. All right, so Red Hat has had a public CVE database pretty much since we started using CVE about 25 years ago. And over time, we went from statically generated CVE pages to dynamic CVE pages that live in our customer portal. We went from describing the CVE, its impact, which errata were fixed that fixed those CVEs, to showing all affected packages, a status of whether or not we would fix them, CVSS information, CWE information, statements, mitigations, and honestly, a lot more than that. Now, our CVE pages have never been behind a paywall, and they've always been publicly available to anyone who wants to view them, customers, industry, competitors, doesn't matter. As time went on, we provided more and more information on these pages so that our customers could have the most information on potential risk as possible, so that they could mitigate any risk that they feel or they felt that they were exposed to. Transparency is one of those key ingredients of our vulnerability management philosophy. And I talk about that a little bit more and some of the challenges that come from being so transparent in my talk on open source risk, acceptance, and equity on Wednesday. So shameless plug for 2 days from now. And when it comes to challenges, one example that we hear about from our customers quite often is that they would like to have our CVE information available to them in disconnected environments. And it occurred to me that VEX would be a potential solution for that. So I gave myself the challenge, reproduce our CVE pages using only VEX as input. The CVE database on our customer portal has a lot of magic behind the scenes that wasn't captured in our early VEX data. And I had to file a few bugs to ask the team to expose more of that information in VEX. And I had to figure out a way to parse that VEX document since we didn't have a tool that would do it for me. So to do that, I had to do 2 things. First, obviously, I had to parse the VEX document. And then secondly, I had to find a way to display it on the web. And I had to do this from scratch again because we hadn't built any of those tools to do it when we started publishing these VEX documents. So in July last year, I started writing the VEX Reader Python library. And since my goal was not to keep this to myself, but to illustrate that this could be useful for others, I made it open source and available as a Python module on PyPI that anyone could use. And this was the building blocks for that web display that I would eventually write. Now, since VEX is just a JSON document, it didn't take very long to get a working prototype, although I am going to offer one caveat. Initially, and even today, it only works properly with CSAF VEX, and in particular, Red Hat's CSAF VEX documents, and I'll get into a little bit of that in a minute. I have not tried it with OpenVEX documents. That's next on my list at some point, and a limited number of other vendors' CSAF VEX documents. Now, to start with, I just wanted it to print out and organize information when parsing a VEX file. So could I get it to give me all of the information and all the details in that VEX document on the command line in a fairly simple way to read? It isn't a very simple way to read. It's a little small on the screen, but it does a pretty good job of it. But it wasn't enough for me just to have it show up on the command line. Ultimately, what I wanted was to be able to reproduce our CVE pages again, using only that VEX content. But there are a couple other caveats. The VEX data only shows vendor information. So I needed it to also pull in information from NVD because our CVE pages currently also list NVD information on those pages. But while I was at it, I wanted to pull in data from cve.org as well to collect those ADP CVSS scores that got assigned there. And since I was doing this as a proof of concept, I figured why not pull in the first EPSS data as well. And with this, I illustrated 2 things. First, you could have that disconnected representation of our CVE pages in your own environment fairly easily, assuming that you didn't need to pull in other sources like NVD. But if you were a vendor, you could also create CVE pages for your own customers, and you could do it pretty easily with a fairly lightweight web application. And for Red Hat, our CVE pages are connected to our customer portal, and there's a significant amount of overhead to get any changes to that data incorporated. So my personal aim here was to show that perhaps one day we might be able to decouple our CVE pages from the customer portal and be able to rapidly update and improve the features and functionality of our CVE pages. And it works pretty well. With the Python Flask web application running on Python Anywhere, I have a representation of our CVE pages without a database that updates in real time. Well, it has a 1-hour cache, so almost real time. It pulls the VEX documents directly from Red Hat's website. It talks to NVD, cv.org, and FIRST via their respective APIs. That's pretty neat, right? That scratched my own itch. But what else can we do with this VEX data? It actually turns out that you can do quite a lot. So one of my team members is heavily focused on AI and experimentation to see how we can use AI to make our lives a little easier, right? Just like everybody else. So he used AI to generate code based on my VEX library that parses a VEX document and turns it into a Hugging Face dataset. So a few months ago, I casually mentioned that it would be ideal if we could use AI to get insights into our vulnerabilities. Maybe which CWE shows up the most in a given time frame, what components get the most CVEs, obviously before the Linux kernel became a CNA, because now it will always and forever be the Linux kernel. So there's a lot of things that we could kind of mine out of our VEX data or our CV data. And using AI in this way could help our analysts also become more quickly and consistently, assign severity ratings and CVSS scores, perhaps based on previous assignments, how a vulnerability is described, what a component is, and so forth. So there's a lot of opportunity here. And so we did. And now there's an unofficial data set on Hugging Face that is updated daily. He used this data so that he could ask the AI questions. And he even found some discrepancies in our data, which is pretty cool. And that helped us because we could then go back in and fix our data, making sure that our information is as accurate as possible. And this is all possible by feeding a standard set of data into a source of data that is easily consumed by AI systems. Again, all based on our VEX documents. And yet, if you're more traditional like me, you can also query that data set like a SQL database, right? So I found a library called DuckDB that will allow me to download a Hugging Face data set and query it like a SQL database. I haven't gotten too far with it yet, but it means that I don't have to import all of the VEX documents into a SQL database myself. I can let somebody else take care of that and then write queries like I normally would and mine it for information in a way that's familiar to me if I don't want AI to do it for me. Forgive me if I don't trust the machines quite yet. So what's next? Well, I tried using the VEX reader to load SUSE's VEX files, and I found some differences. Notably here, the way that they represented ISO dates is different than the way that Red Hat represented them. And it highlighted a bug in Python 3.9's handling of ISO format date strings, causes a crash. So there was a bug that I had to fix. And thankfully, somebody submitted a pull request that fixed it. Fortunately, I realized it a few months later because I had turned off GitHub notifications because my wonderful team has me on all of the GitHub repositories that Red Hat Product Security has out there. And when I turned them back on, I realized why I turned them off. I'm getting spammed by so much stuff that I just matters to them, doesn't matter to me. So I don't know if we're doing it wrong or if SUSE is doing it wrong, but their data is definitely different from ours, despite being in that CSAF VEX format. So there's a few bugs to fix and some further investigation that needs to be done to account for those differences. But eventually, my intent is that VEX Reader will be able to read SUSE's VEX files. And as I've looked at others, Red Hat definitely puts a lot more data into our VEX files, as an example. Cisco is another example, and I believe somebody's going to be talking about Cisco's VEX files shortly later this morning. They're readable. It did work. It did work, and I don't have a screenshot for it. I won't. Okay, all right. There are secrets coming later. I'll leave that to you. It does work, right? There are differences, though. From my perspective, they don't provide as much information, say, as our Red Hat ones do, but maybe that's okay. That could simply be a difference between open source and proprietary software.
in many, I'm going to
Can
admit,
you repeat the gold standard part first for the people online?
I don't know what you're talking about. No, not only in VEX, but I was with the Cisco PISA, the product security incident response team, for more than 20 years. And in many cases, when we were looking at vulnerability and we were like, man, this is hard. Immediately, you know, instead of what will Jesus do, we will be like, what does Red Hat say? So from our point of view, you guys, so I don't want to say we look up to you, but we kind of look up to you, okay? So yeah, that's my feedback to you. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. My head has not swelled. I already knew this. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, thank you. No, I appreciate it, right? Because a lot of the things that we're doing, we're trying to lead the way in some examples, right? And I mean, this goes back to our philosophy and ethos of transparent information. And I mean, we believe that everybody should kind of be like us because our customers value it. Again, it kind of bites us in the rear end a little bit because we are so transparent, right? But when it comes to the data and the tools and just the way of representing these things, we want our customers and users to be able to understand their risk fully and not try to hide any of it, right? So we always try to kind of push the edge a little bit because we think it's important. So I definitely appreciate that feedback. Thank you. There's also OpenVex, which is something that I haven't looked at yet. So I'm not sure how different it is from CSAFX, but it does highlight where I think we're going to see some challenges when it comes to broad VEX adoption. My library is one thing, but if we want scanning vendors to use VEX, and we should, there might need to be more consistency between vendor-provided VEX documents. Now, thankfully, these scanning vendors charge outrageous amounts of money for them to use, so they have people who are paid to be able to do this sort of work, right? But unless they see the advantages and enough vendors start producing VEX documents, where's the incentive for these scanning vendors to actually use the things that we're producing? So we have to figure out ways to incentivize scanning vendors to use that data because it's designed to produce more accurate results than we're seeing today with older technologies and the way that a lot of scanning vendors try to discern vulnerability state on whatever it is that they're scanning. So with VEX, the possibilities truly are almost limitless, right? They're a great source of vulnerability data that can be used in a number of different ways. They can be used by scanning vendors, again, to better surface accurate vulnerability information. And if you couple that with SBOMs, you could likely use VEX in a way that shows patched and unpatched vulnerabilities, even for systems that you don't have immediate access to. In fact, I was looking this up, I think last week or the week before, and I believe that Trivy can do this already. Not that I'm endorsing Trivy, but they were an example that does both. And I'm not sure about other scanners. I didn't go looking too far. You can also easily get statistics, oversight, and other useful information using VEX on your systems, assuming that your vendor is publishing data in VEX and publishing data for both fixed and unfixed vulnerabilities. That's very important. Also, the unfixed vulnerabilities. That gets you the full true representation. Now, obviously, this is up to the vendor or the open source project to produce that information, but the possibilities are definitely there. And given that everyone wants this kind of information, vendors really should be looking to expose as much of this as possible so that their users can make proper risk-based decisions on how the software that they're using is exposed and deployed. And that's all I got. We've got about 10 minutes, I think, for some Q&A or more praises. Kidding. I'm kidding. Definitely more questions, but thank you very much. Yes, sir. Yep. Yeah, I could hear you.
Does that work?
Oh, yes, there you go.
Cool. Okay. So VEX is for both vulnerables, CVEs that are vulnerable and those that are not for a product, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So for customer vulnerability management, if one could get a complete, if one could
Mic
get,
drop.
is it still working?
A complete VEX mic drop. I love it.
If one could get a complete VEX document from any running instance of an application, okay, ask the application for its VEX and it would give it to you.
Okay.
Is there any customer security benefit at all for getting an SBOM?
Maybe. I mean, it's a little challenging, right? Because when you're looking at like VEX should tell you this CV is applicable to these versions of this particular software, right? The SBOM will tell you which version of that software you have. And this is where I kind of think the two are necessary. The SBOM tells you you're running application version XYZ. The VEX will tell you XYZ is vulnerable, not vulnerable, or a later version is or not. The VEX doesn't necessarily tell you what you have installed, right? So keep in mind, an SBOM is point in time. When you upgrade the software, you should have an upgraded SBOM, but as long as you're running that application and you haven't upgraded any software, that SBOM is valid. That VEX could change every day, depending on when new vulnerabilities are discovered or not.
Sure, but I was postulating that the running program could give you its VEX. In that case, the reason for SBOMs right now is to link them to CVEs. And then,
No, the reason for SBOMs is to let you know what software you have, independent of CVs.
the vulnerability management reason for SBOMs is to link them to CVEs and every customer I'm aware of.
Okay.
I know there's other people that saying you can use it for other things to make purchasing decisions because somehow you can figure out from the components whether they're good. I was talking about vulnerability management.
Right, but SBOMs themselves don't contain CV information.
Correct.
Right.
But what they're used for is to link them to CVEs that allegedly or maybe vulnerabilities in the product for vulnerability management.
Correct. Yep.
Right. I mean, there's other things like license management and,
Sure.
Yeah, they can also give you a heads up if something goes in the wild that hasn't been issued a CVE
Sure,
yet.
sure.
Gives you early notification.
but if the product could give you its up-to-date VEX, then I don't see a reason for SBOM for vulnerability management.
No, I mean, from that perspective, probably not. I don't think you're going to convince any customer that, hey, here's my VEX, you don't need an SBOM, because a lot of them are still like, I want an SBOM, please give me an SBOM whether I use it or not. But I think you're right. You could use VEX without needing SBOMs at all.
And the other thing is that okay, so that's part one. Part two is there some reason that scanning vendors can't produce a VEX document for a product?
They
And
are not experts on the product.
No, I'm not saying that. Yeah, it's a technical problem, sure, but they could.
They could, but maybe I'll just go back to my concern is we get that if we leave it up to scanning vendors, because this is what scanning vendors are doing right now, right? So whether they're producing this based on their own data and they're spitting it out into a VEX format or some other format, right? It doesn't matter.
Sure.
It's the non-experts who are putting together that VEX data. I think that's wrong. It should be the vendors who built the thing, who know what the vulnerabilities are, who do the assessments in the context of that application. Because otherwise you have people like NVD who rate the most silliest of things as a 9.8 CVSS. And I'm sorry, I just don't think that these are biased third parties or ignorant third parties who should not be assessing risk for any vendor.
Do you guys have any plan for trying to get the scanning vendors to take your VEX? And could we help you where I work?
Where do you work?
Oracle.
Oh, okay.
In getting that to happen.
Yeah, we have a certification program that we have for scanning vendors for specifically for Red Hat software. And one of the things we're trying to do is get them to use our VEX. But I mean, as part of that, if other vendors were like, hey, as you're scanning our stuff, we produce VEX as well. I think that if enough vendors are providing VEX documents, then it becomes compelling for them to use as part of their software.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We have a question on Discord. Is VEX can VEX be used to add additional attributes like to oval, to check for example DLL version to know if some patches have been applied or not?
I believe, I can't speak for OpenVex. I believe CSAF VEX, you can extend it as well. Now, I don't know what that means in terms of like the prior questions around scanning vendors. They may not understand or like the extensions that go on there, but I believe you can extend CSAF VEX anyways, in certain ways, probably in a way that would satisfy that answer.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jarek. A little bit of a context. I'm an Apache Software Foundation member and Apache Airflow maintainer, open source maintainer. And you are talking a lot about vendors and providing the VEX and producing the VEX. And Red Hat, have the money and people to work and produce the VEX and analyze the issues. What's your thoughts about the burden that will be put on the open source maintainers to prepare the VEX information? Because currently, like, it will be expected from open source people to produce the VEXs, and we have volunteers only, like in our case. And we are experts in our project, yes, and we can analyze and respond to CVEs which are reported to us. But we have like, Airflow has like 700 dependencies, yeah? So, and we are not experts in those. So how can we assess and what the industry can do to help us with assessing actually to produce the VEXs, the quality VEXs that we can tell with some level of certainty we are or we aren't vulnerable, because otherwise, like, I have a CV in those 700 dependencies every 2 hours, more or less.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for one, I don't think you can mandate open source does anything. That's the beauty of open source, right? I do think that there are ways to provide tooling for open source communities to be able to do this. Most open source communities have like a website with like known vulnerabilities or whatnot displayed on there. If we could have a tool that make it very easy for them to produce that, maybe as part of a Git workflow or something like that, that information could be made accessible. But I don't know what that looks like. I know that there's some CRA and things like that who are like pushing for these things. But I mean, at the end of the day, CRA can't mandate any of that stuff to Bob, the open source developer, right? They should do that, but not because they're being mandated to by a government entity. And we just have to make it easy for them to do it. So.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you. Visit the Discord if you have additional questions. And Vincent, it's your job to go look at that Discord channel and answer all the questions for your talk. Let me know if you need to know where that's at.
Yes.
Thank you, Vincent.
Thank you very much.